Pick of the round one ties. Datrobino on red-white Spiritdancer. Velocihat on blue-white control.
Sure, how did it fit with this thing? It's going to connect.
Already Lurus is coming out, so we don't have a SRAM or a Spiritdancer as backup here to the two SRAMs that have already been played. This is the problem with this deck. If you don't have one of the special cards, then it just doesn't really do anything at all. You can put a bunch of auras on a benevolent bodyguard, I guess. $55 players. On the smaller end for a 500, I guess, but I think we've had roughly those kind of numbers recently. And here we go. It's time for auras on a benevolent bodyguard. The Plan C. This is a very big benevolent bodyguard. Condemn. Lagoon Breach, just as good. And that's game one. Yeah. This deck doesn't really function without one of the cards you want to put auras on. Datrobino mulligans. Velocihat does not. Keep 6. Turn 1 bodyguard. Presumably a Spiritdancer or a SRAM here. Spiritdancer, the best card. And a lot of pressure for Velocihat already. Countering the auras doesn't really do very much. And the first removal spell is going to be blanked by the bodyguard. Might need a Wrath on turn 4 here. Starting off with an Immolation, which I'm surprised is still in after board, really, but it does trigger the Spiritdancer and it does increase its power, so not so bad. Maybe the idea here is to play the red auras in case of Path or Condemn, so that the pro-white doesn't make things fall off. So there's a Path, bodyguard gets used, there's Condemn. And perfect turn 2 or turn 3 there for the control deck. Datrobino really needs to follow up with an uncountered SRAM or Spiritdancer, which doesn't happen, and that's the game. Okay, well, that was the glamour tie of round 1. Yesterday's tournament finalist against a previous PD 500 winner, but it was pretty short and sweet. Let's see if we can look at something else. Okay. I think CD Newland maybe won a 500 with Simic Infect many years ago. Maybe we'll take a look at this game, although they're sideboarding at the moment. Many-time PD 500 top 8er Tygrak then we'll take a look at. So it's Goblins against blue-white control. Currently still in game 1. Blue-white control down to 10 life. facing a board of really crappy goblins. But we're forbidding a 1/1 here, so obviously somewhat afraid of this board of really crappy 1/1s. Presumably not untapping into a Wrath next turn then, if we're forbidding that. Note that Echo has been paid on Mog War Marshal. Always a sign you're playing against control. Only 2 cards in hand for blue-white control. Tygrak sacking his board to try and find a lord or a war boss or something more interesting than these 1/1s or 1/2s. Looks like that didn't happen, and in fact now we're afraid of the Celestial Colonnade activation and we're just going to do nothing. So looks like Tygrak might have drawn quite a few lands here. There's a Chieftain, a War Boss, and a Pashalik Mons in exile, 2 paths and a No More Lies in the blue-white control graveyard, so we can see what happened there. Tygrak probably wishing he had 2 more 1/2s instead of these treasure tokens and whatever these cards in hand are. Possibly building up to a big turn to overwhelm counter spells, but more likely just holding not very much. Here comes the lackey. And here's the big play. Chieftain resolves, so if it's just Celestial Colonnade block, this is lethal, and in fact Tygrak wins. So he was to some extent holding some stuff for a big turn at least. Goblins goes 1-0 up. So I see the Nimble Obstructionist in the graveyard here, which I think implies this is more Azorius tempo aggro control, and in fact I think it's probably my deck list, or at least there are no cards amongst the lands and the spells cast last turn that aren't on my deck list. So we can expect a lot of Wrath of God and Settle the Wreckage post-board. Try and deal with these pesky goblins. Novice Inspector blanking this Mog Fanatic. Damage no longer goes on the stack, so no way to trade for it. The dreaded double Novice Inspector, enemy of goblins everywhere. Interesting to play out another Novice Inspector rather than crack a clue. Not very mana efficient unless they also have a path or something like that that they want to use this turn. But 1-2 blocker is pretty good. This third non-basic land here, presumably the Goblins players brought in Price of Progress post-board, although it is only a 2-color deck, so maybe not, but right now they do 6 damage, possibly rising. Okay, Morg War Marshal, getting wider here. Could attack for 4 right now. But you'd lose either the Fanatic or trade the Pile Driver for both Inspectors. Decides it's better to wait, maybe planning to follow up with something like a Chieftain on turn 4. Make everybody be able to get through these Inspectors. Arzanjeesus just cracks a clue. Post-board, this deck probably has some Wrath of Gods, some Settle the Wreckages, maybe even 4 of each, depending on which list of mine they copied. And here comes 2 Novice Inspectors, which I think implies we're going to see land Wrath of God here. Using to block with a Morg War Marshal is interesting. It means you don't have a Goblin left over after this Wrath that's presumably coming. Maybe would have blocked with Fanatic and sacked it or something, I don't know. Maybe just not block, it's only 2 damage. Here comes the Wrath, and that's a pretty clean 4 for 1, given that the Inspectors made clues. And I guess that's kind of, the ideal turn 4 for this deck against Goblins. There's no Ringleader to follow up with to refill the hand here, but Tygrak does have 4 cards. Could possibly make a 1-drop and a Haste Lord, or a War Boss, or 2 2s, all of which would be, some amount of pressure. Hasn't done any damage yet, and in fact, passes the turn, so looks like we're going to 1-1 in this game, assuming Arzanjeesus can find a creature to close the game out with, or a Stoic Sphinx or something. Not clear how many creatures you board out when you board in up to 8 Wrath of Gods. I mean, settled, not really. Okay, so we're main phasing a Sphinx. Not sure what we play around there. Maybe the 5th land and a Burst Lightning. Burst Lightning would certainly be the kind of card you would keep in hand. And now the Sphinx has hexproof, and so it's hard to imagine the Goblins deck putting up lethal in 4 turns. They can't block it unless they cast a spell. Oh, well, they do cast a spell, so Sphinx is now... Okay. But there is no kicked Burst Lightning or something similar for Tygrak, and we're going to a deciding game. Yeah, that Wrath is just very, very good, and Tygrak without one of his more powerful Goblin War Boss type cards to follow up with after the Wrath. Instead, I guess, a bunch of lands. And Stoic Sphinx is finishes you off pretty quickly, whether you put Luminarch Aspirant +1/+1 counters on it or not. I guess it's a turn quicker with the Aspirant 6+7+8 instead of 4/5s. So Goblins on the play here can obviously curve out with 1-drop Moira, Marauder, Chieftain or some draw like that and put blue-white under a lot of pressure. Novice Inspector helps for sure. Path to Exile, and then you really just want to be doing almost anything at all to stay alive and not take a ton of damage in order to Wrath or Settle the Wreckage on turn 4, after which, hopefully you can land a Sphinx. If it is exactly my list, it will have a 1-of Splendor Mare, so you can potentially give your hexproof 5/3 flyer lifelink, which is extremely difficult for the Goblins deck to handle. And we do have a turn 1 Inspector blanking the Mog Fanatic again, so far so perfect for blue-white. Does Tygrak have a good follow-up here? Best follow-up would be Moira Marauder into Lord. Oh, so we have a Sparksmith, so we can now kill the Novice Inspector, assuming we get to untap with it. It's probably fine to take a bunch of damage from your Sparksmith in this matchup. It's possible that blue-white has some kind of aggro draw with Luminarch Aspirant into Boromir into Stoic Sphinx and punishes that a little, but of course if they have that you can probably just kill those things with your Sparksmith. So yeah, seems like pretty good here, maybe the best two. And Novice Inspector, wary of its coming death, is just going to get in. Maybe you have to make them do it, but no, we're just going to kill it right now. So that attack was all upside. And we do have a Marauder, and it does resolve. Can Fanatic find Goblins a land here, or maybe a 1-drop if they have a land in hand? One's a Prospector, so if they have a land, yeah, they do have a land. So this is a pretty tasty board, and we're still 2 turns away from a Wrath or a Settle. If there's a Lord, presumably there's no 2-mana counter in hand here. So next turn is probably going to be a freebie. So if they play a Lord, it's about 12 damage, and looking at a lot of cards. Maybe they just want to attack and look at the cards and keep these whatever 3 cards they have in hand for any potential Wrath. We've got another Novice Inspector here, which is not nothing, but dies to Sparksmith for sure. And there it goes. Okay, so we are playing a haste creature before attacking, but otherwise we just want to see what we're going to draw off this Marauder. Here's the first strike, they hit the mountain. So there's a Price Approach that only does 2 damage, but Mountain Chieftain's pretty good. Definitely a little weak here to the Wrath, but at least Tygrak still has 3 cards in hand. And he does play the Chieftain from exile. I think it makes sense, right? The only way he's losing this game is if the next turn involves a Wrath. So playing something from hand is just asking for trouble, really. Save those cards for after the Wrath, if there is such a thing. Don't think any of the creatures or the spot removal out of blue-white does anything here. And certainly the counterspells don't. So it's really about, well, no Wrath, so it's really about Settle the Wreckage or Bust. Presumably there is a Settle the Wreckage, and Tygrak could maybe attack with only the expendable creatures here for about 6 or 8. And that is in fact what he does. Oh, decides Sparksmith is not expendable and 6 damage is fine. Oh, is attacking with Marauder. So he thinks he has enough in hand with the haste of Chieftain next turn to probably kill through anything, especially as he's going to have at least 8 lands. Yeah, and here is the Settle, which was really the only card that keeps blue-white in it here. Has Tygrak held back enough that it won't be good enough for blue-white? I think probably yes, but it does depend what those cards in hand are. Trying to decide whether to sack Mog Fanatic or have a... Oh yeah. Oh, sacking the Lackey for a card, that makes sense. We're going to sack Fanatic for 1 damage. No, we'd rather have a land. Okay. So I think either another Settle, a Wrath, or spot removal on Goblin Chieftain is going to be required here to beat Tygrak. Otherwise he's going to be coming in for presumably at least about 8 damage next turn. But zapping the Chieftain really would make a lot of difference. 6 cards in hand for blue-white. A lot of possibilities. Potentially flashes in a Sphinx, blocks the Chieftain and takes the damage from all the rest, but that might be lethal or close to it. Maybe untap, give it lifelink, try to race. So we have another Marauder. So this is already 8 damage, draw 4 cards. Unless we do something about Chieftain. Another Chieftain, which is 1, 2, 5, 7 more damage. It's lethal now. And we cannot stop these creatures having haste with 1 spot removal spell. So this is just gotta be Settle. Another Settle or Bust. The fact that Arjan hasn't done anything that has 6 cards in hand makes another Settle distinctly possible. We're getting in with everything except Marauder. Which is 12 damage, and then 1 post-combat from Fanatic. So they're going to 1 here if they don't have Settle, or some kind of interaction. I think I like keeping a Chieftain back, but maybe if you have a Chieftain in hand... Oh, we are deducing, so there's no Settle, and in fact things look extremely dire for blue-white. Okay, and takes the full 9, goes to 5. Marauder reveals 3 mountains, which I guess is good for Goblins that they didn't have to draw those, but not a very exciting post-combat. They have massively lethal on board, no need to extend any further into a Wrath here. Azjan on effective 4 from the Fanatic, really just needs Wrath of God. Not much else will do. Could make a Boromir and get it lifelink. That seems pretty useless. Sphinx doesn't do anything, and there's the GGs. And Goblins taking it down. Oh, well, we're playing on after the GGs in traditional Magic player fashion. So, I think that was the last match of round one. I'm going to stop streaming now because I'm going to go play, but I'll be back once I scrub out, or perhaps for the ends of rounds.